I'm going to try the mic without the stand. I'm still learning how to use a mic without a stand. If my hand shakes, it's because I have Parkinson's, but don't worry about that. It's just a shaky hand, not a shaky lead. So, I've been doing comedy for about 3 years now. Usually I tell personal stories. The ones I'd like to tell tonight are about how Hollywood lies to us. First sight, there we go. First sight, labor, and newborn. I name my stories so they're easier to remember. So first sight. So in the movies, romantic comedy movies, there's always that moment when a guy meets a girl. He stares into her eyes, she stares into his eyes. Usually there's music in the background, and it's lovely, and they get married shortly after that. So that's not exactly how it happens in real life. Let me tell you about my first date with my future husband. So a guy told him, nagged him until he finally called me, and he asked me to go tobogganing. We were at Michigan State, and I said, well, there's no, it's January, but there's no snow on the ground. Can you actually go tobogganing if there's no snow? And he said, well, I'm from Georgia. They tell me I control the sun. I will turn it off. This was on a Tuesday night. On Thursday, it started snowing. 27 inches of snow. They closed the roads. We could not get to the toboggan run. And you would think that at that point I'd be thinking to myself, wow, he really does control the sun. But no, apparently I'm hard to impress. Because what I was thinking about is, what am I going to wear? Now, I'd lived in Texas for about 6 years by then, but before that I lived in Iowa, so I was used to snow. And I remembered layering, so I wore 3 of everything. 3 pairs of pants, 3 coats, 3 pairs of mittens, 3 pairs of socks. I looked like the Michelin Man. And there was no music playing in the background when we met. It wasn't exactly love at first sight when we met. However, we both stopped dating anyone else after that first date. It was months before I realized it might not have been love at first sight, but it was love at first date. We married almost a year to the day that we met, and we've now been married 51 years. We've still never been tobogganing. So, labor. So in the movies, the way labor happens is a woman's water breaks, she goes into labor, 10 minutes later she has a new baby. So I'm impressionable and I watch all these movies and I think, okay, so labor doesn't take very long. I should have understood that it was a little bit longer than that when I talked to the wife of a theater owner that I worked for in college, and she was telling me about the first time she was pregnant. She went into labor, her husband was just opening a new theater, and so at intermission she told him, said, I'm going into labor, and he said, well, wait until after intermission, and then I will take you to the hospital. Where's the urgency? If you've only got 10 minutes and you need a police escort, can you really wait? Well, they waited. And I asked her about that. I said, oh, is this a problem? She said, no, you've got hours. So I should have been prepared. So when I went into labor with our first son, my husband was an officer cadet at school, so he was living on the base, and I was living off base with a roommate. And my roommate's mother happened to be visiting that week, and she watched me all day long. Finally she said, you need to go have a doctor check you before the hospital closes and you have to go to the ER. So I said, okay. So I walk into the hospital, receptionist asked me, are you in labor? And I said, I have no idea, you need to tell me, I've never done this before. Sure enough, they said, okay, well, we're gonna keep you. And they told my husband, well, it could be tonight, it could be tomorrow, we don't know how long it's gonna be. So again, no police escort, no urgency. He was born five hours later. Second son took 13 hours of labor, and I have since found out labor lasts an average of 11 hours. So I don't know where all the police escorts are coming from, but you do have a few hours usually when you go into labor. And my water never broke. I don't know what that story is about. Maybe it's more dramatic in the movies, but the movies are lying to us. So the third story is newborn. So every movie I've ever seen, when a newborn is born, they place the baby gently in the mother's arms as soon as the baby is born. So of course, when my son was born, I reached out my arms and the nurse pulled him back and said, you're dirty. I'm like, I'm dirty? He was just born. He's got all the same germs I do. It was years before a nurse finally explained to me I wasn't dirty, but I could get germs on the baby that they would then take back to the nursery for the other babies not to be used to. And so now they double wrap the babies and they take that extra wrapping off before they put them in the nursery. Thanks, Hollywood, for telling me how life does not work. Apparently, I watch too many movies. Thank you. I'm Carol Covin. You can find me on Facebook and